It's Friday the 18th of October and I'm here at Jazz FM Studios to record this week's Market Insights podcast with Jonny Hart from the Business Breakfast. This week we talk Brexit, China GDP and the ECB. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, turn on notifications and leave any feedback in the comments box below.
You're listening to the OANDA Market Insights podcast. I'm Jonny Hart. Each week we review and preview the big business and market stories with OANDA Senior Market Analyst Craig Erlam. And it is a very good morning to Craig. What an incredible week it has been. I think we've said that a few times, but even by Brexit standards, I don't think even you could have predicted last week that Boris Johnson would get a new deal. Were you surprised?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I'd have predicted it last week, it definitely would not have happened.
Well, you've got form, let's face it.
Exactly, especially with Brexit. I mean, yeah, it's been incredible. I mean, we all knew that the summit was happening on Thursday and Friday, so we all knew that a deal kind of had to happen by this day. But I think more people probably thought that a deal just wasn't going to happen, that talks were going to collapse, and we were going to going into Parliament on Saturday and talking about extensions. We wouldn't be talking about a deal. Now, I still think we're going to be talking about extensions, but it is amazing that we have got a deal. The only question became after the deal arrived, and we've got to remember, this actually started a week ago. The market reaction started a week ago. So when Boris Johnson met Leo Varadkar, we were talking about this, I think, last week on the podcast, the pathway to a possible deal. I was very sceptical about that. The use of the word possible in there made me very sceptical. It sounded very promising. It sounded very optimistic. And the markets have just basically, especially the pound, has just rallied since that meeting. And they've found a deal. The question was, and this was the same question we had last week, and I don't think it's been I think it probably has been answered at this point, is how much did Boris sell out the DUP in order to get this deal over the line? Because there was clearly a difference between what the DUP wanted and what the EU wanted. And it seems, based on the noises we're hearing, that the DUP want back a deal, that he's sold them out enough that they just can't get behind it, which now brings the question of whether he's going to have the numbers in Parliament on Saturday to pass this deal, or whether this is just a charade en route to an election.
And because of those thoughts coming out of the DUP camp, even as we speak, they said absolutely not, and we're not going to vote for the deal. The pound has slipped back a bit, hasn't it? I mean, some incredible rises actually since Monday. What sort of percentages are we talking about between Monday and yesterday, Thursday?
Yeah, it was 6 or 7% the pound rose against the dollar. So that's quite, I mean, people always underestimate how big that is. So in stocks terms, it's not very big. In Bitcoin terms, it's irrelevant. It is a boring Monday morning when you're talking Bitcoin. But in the currency markets, that's huge. Just for perspective, the pound fell 10% in the immediate aftermath of the referendum, and that was unbelievable. So we've risen 6 or 7% this week. So I mean that's really, really, really considerable. But as you say, that happened over 5 days. That didn't happen like the referendum in the space of a day or in the space of 12 hours. So the reason why the pound has pulled back is pretty much twofold. There's the old adage in the market, buy the rumour, sell the fact. This has been building for a week, and the pound has been pricing it in for a week. So when it actually happened, when we knew what the deal was, then all of a sudden you see kind of profit-taking kick in. So you see the knee-jerk reaction, and then traders are kind of like, well, what else is there to come? What else is there to price in right now? Nothing. It's been announced. It's exactly what we expected, or it's in line with what we were pricing in, so therefore the market pulls back a bit when you start to see some profit taking. Then there was the DUP announcement as well, which did aid, I would say, the profit taking, which was the DUP said they wouldn't back the deal. So all of a sudden it becomes clear that Boris Johnson is going to really struggle to get the numbers in Parliament. The parliamentary arithmetic, as it's being touted, is not in his favour, and therefore this is going. If we think this soap opera is going to end just because he's got a deal, I think we're kidding ourselves. I think that there's a good chance we're heading for an extension, unless what Jean-Claude Juncker said yesterday is accurate, which is if the EU27 tell the UK that there will be no extension, that it's this or no deal, then I think he'll get it over the line. And that's what Boris Johnson's pushing for. But I really struggle to see a scenario whereby they do that, because until now they have not wanted to be offering ultimatums to the UK because they don't want to be the bad guys in case no deal happens.
But that also puts the responsibility on the opposition for a no-deal Brexit. If they actually rule it out tomorrow in the big vote, there are a number of permutations that could happen. Mm-hmm. We could have another vote with a referendum, etc., etc. But Boris Johnson's quite a good position here, really, because he's got his deal, which was against practically everybody's expectations. He's done it before the deadline, and now the onus is on everyone else. So even if it doesn't go through Parliament tomorrow, or if it does, he's still a winner.
Yeah, so, I mean, we've all seen Brexit flowcharts. And the deal has created an entirely new flowchart. And don't worry, it's just as complex as the rest of them. There's just as many permutations. It's just as impossible to read and just as boring. And
I love a good flowchart.
Oh, I mean, we all do in Brexit. The Brexit flowcharts is just the place to be. But there's so many things that could happen. And you know what? We're not going to talk about them all now, partly because we don't have enough time and partly because we just don't know. There's always new strands that come off as the days and weeks pass by. Now, if the EU 27 were to give us an ultimatum and basically say it's this deal, no deal, or revoke, Parliament does not have the guts to revoke without going to a second referendum. And if they're giving us that option, then there's no time for a second referendum either. So I think what we see in that scenario is we see a lot of people not voting. So,
but are you suggesting that there might be another, say, Saturday sitting, something like that, an extraordinary sitting? So what happens is it doesn't go through this Saturday. It goes back to the EU. And as you suggest, they said there's not going to be any extension, and then he bring it back to Parliament after that.
Well, it depends if the EU speak today and tell us that there's not going to be an extension, but I think then there'll be a lot of MPs abstaining, because if you're Jeremy Corbyn or many of the people in the Labour Party who've said we need a second referendum on any deal, and we can't back any deal without a second referendum, then you're not going to vote for a deal, but you're also not going to vote to revoke Article 50, because you don't want to be seen as overriding the will of the people. So what you'll do is you'll abstain, and then Boris Johnson will get the numbers based purely on the people who are in the Leave constituencies and the Conservative Party.
Dangerous calculation though for the opposition, isn't it? Really, because they're sitting on the fence.
Everything's a dangerous calculation, but it is all calculated. So you know, if I'm abstaining, I'm not stopping this going through. You know it's going through. You're not objecting. You're just putting yourself in a very in this political neutral ground. You're the political Switzerland in many ways.
You said off air before that you didn't think that there was going to be a vote for the deal on Saturday.
So so it's definitely going through then.
Let's see. But it's not out of the question, isn't it? Because you mentioned the Labour MPs in those Brexit constituencies. They're a sizable number. We know the Kate Hoeys and the John Manns, who are definitely going to vote for Boris Johnson's deal, because they're leaving as MPs anyway, and they've always been Brexiteers. But they're talking about 20 to 30 Labour MPs who may vote for it.
So it's a considerable number of Labour MPs that need to go against the whip, because the word in the street is also that they're going to whip MPs. Which basically, if you remember, not so long ago, it feels like an age ago, when the Conservatives employed the whip and Conservative MPs voted with the opposition to force an extension, they were effectively kicked out of the Conservative Party.
They might be coming back in.
Yeah, exactly. But, I mean, so Labour are apparently employing the whip on this. So which MPs are going to go against the whip and risk being kicked out the party? And the numbers are difficult. And are they going to do it if they don't think it's going to make a difference, if they don't think a deal's going to get through? For me, which, like I say, therefore it's probably wrong, I feel that they're not going to have the numbers. The absence of the DUP is not going to give them numbers. And if there's members of the ERG that up until now have said we can't back any deal that the DUP doesn't back, if they don't think the numbers are there, then they won't vote with it either, because they're not going to put their neck on the line if it's not going to be worth the while. And I feel like they're going to vote against it. But it's not the end of the world for Boris Johnson. As you said, he's in an extremely strong position because he doesn't really need this to pass. If this doesn't pass, then yes, we're left in a position where we're getting an extension. He doesn't have to be the person to request that. He can stand by his pledge. And then he's fighting an election on, I literally got a deal that didn't keep the entire of the UK in the backstop. I literally got a deal that the EU said couldn't happen. I reopened the withdrawal agreement. I did all the things that people said was impossible. And then the MPs on the other side of the House blocked it because they are against you. This is the perfect position for him to be fighting an election on. And
I agree to a certain point, but the problem for him is he's got a number of opposition parties against him for all sorts of different reasons. Brexit Party, Liberal Democrats, Labour, SNP and so on. They've all got their own agenda, so they might squeeze that Tory vote and actually form a coalition of sorts even if it's a minority government coalition, after whenever the election is. It's a dangerous game, really, isn't it?
So the way I see this is you're looking at an election, and it almost reminds me of kind of Italian politics or a number of these other countries where you have many parties. We're kind of used to two-party politics, whereas we're now the Lib Dems have got a considerable number and the Brexit Party could get a considerable number. But it doesn't really matter, because all that matters is you've got to separate them into two camps. There's the want to leave side of Parliament, which is the Conservatives and the Brexit Party, and then there's the want a second referendum / Remain side of it, which is the Labour Party, the Lib Dems, the SNP, and it's a case of who has more votes. So if you have all you need in Parliament for Boris Johnson to get his deal through, he needs the Conservatives and the Brexit Party to get a majority between the two of them in the next election, and the DUP, but then the DUP aren't voting with his deal.
Yeah.
Whereas
I don't see
the risk is that the opposition parties and the get the majority, because then there's a considerable chance that you actually end up with a second referendum.
You might, and I don't see the Brexit Party winning any seats. They're just going to take some of the votes away from the Conservatives. The Liberal Democrats might get some more seats because of that. And as I said, Boris Johnson's finished. So it is an extremely difficult thing to calculate. But I know you've been hard on yourself saying you're never right about these things, but you know what's the saying? Even a stopped clock, it tells the time correctly twice a day. Is there going to be an election in the next, say, 6 weeks?
It's really difficult, because we're in the time of year now. Are they going to want to hold an election before Christmas? Probably not, because it's
they
just
have
the
to
wrong...
give 6 weeks notice anyway, don't they?
Yeah, and it's the wrong time of year to be having an election. But what has been conventional about Brexit? Absolutely nothing. It wouldn't surprise me if the election is literally on Christmas Day, just to really take the
I think
mick.
the turnout would be rather small.
To be honest, it's Brexit. I wouldn't even bank on that. I mean, I certainly wouldn't bother going to the...
But in a sense, what the election will be in a sort of a referendum on Brexit anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's literally how the parties are positioning themselves. The Brexit Party don't stand for anything else. The Lib Dems are the Remain Party. They're not even a second referendum party. They are the Remain Party, and you can't really associate them with too much else beyond that, because everyone's obsessed with Brexit. You're literally putting people in brackets based on how they feel about Brexit. The only difference, obviously, is it is with Labour, because they are trying to change the topic, and they are the Conservatives, obviously, if you look at their latest, like their kind of manifesto, they are trying to also talk about other things in the same way that the Labour Party did it in 2017. But the other parties, it's very Brexit centric.
Tough time to be a businessman, a speculator, an investor, to play the markets. It's
a commentator.
Yeah, a commentator. Well, it's great for you, of course, because there's always plenty to say. Shall we leave Brexit now?
No, let's carry on.
We're going to carry on. Just before you go, actually, Craig, I just want to say there are other things apparently happening.
Oh, no.
Yeah, we've got the latest numbers for the Chinese economy, a bit disappointing. 6% rather than 6.1% growth, which was predicted. And that slowdown, despite government efforts to support the economy, including measures such as tax cuts, etc. And, of course, the ECB is meeting next week as well.
Yeah, I mean, the Chinese number, it was below expectations, but it's not altogether surprising. And the fact that they're still squeezing out growth above 6% or at 6% is actually...
We dream of that, don't we?
Can you imagine? It's still some going. So we're not talking catastrophic events when we're discussing China, but obviously it is heading in the wrong direction. The ECB next week, I feel like it's going to be a bit of a non-event. It's Mario Draghi's final meeting, so there is going to be that kind of party atmosphere, I guess. I'm sure there'll probably be a cake. There may even be a protester or two.
Yeah.
But they announced their stimulus package at the last meeting, so what more are they really going to do at this meeting? There's no economic projections. I think it's going to be a bit of a quiet end to Mario Draghi's term. Like I say, they announced a big stimulus package. There was QE, there was a rate cut, there was TLTROs, there was talk of there was obviously the suggestion with regards to negative rates at banks and ways to alleviate that pain. What else is there that they can announce 1 month later? Nothing. It's going to be a quiet one. Next week, I think, is just going to be dominated by the same three topics that everything's being dominated by right now, which is Brexit, trade war, and earnings season, which started this week and will really start to pick up some pace now.
I've just had an idea. I think we should do an additional podcast earlier next week rather than on the Friday, because we know so many things could happen between now and then. Do you agree to that?
Yeah, I mean, let's do it. It'll probably be outdated by the time it actually goes live, but like this one. But I mean, let's give it a go.
Listen to this while it's still fresh is the answer.
Yeah, live, I think, is probably the time to do it.
Hopefully we'll speak again pretty soon. Have a good weekend.
You too, mate.
If you enjoy these videos, don't forget to like and subscribe, turn on notifications, and leave any feedback in the comments box below.